The Stars Beckon. Chapter 5. Captain Fontana's words proved to be prophetic. In less than a day, the powers that be had come to a decision and gave Magellan their marching orders. They laid in a course for the next beacon, located in a K-class star system roughly 90 light-years from Earth. The original plan, when Proxima had been the destination, was a big send-off with media coverage and speeches to commemorate the historic occasion. Instead, they received a brief message from the UN Secretary-General wishing them luck before they departed. Not a brass band in sight, just a hope and a prayer they'd be up to the task. Since the dawn of time, man had gazed up at the stars and dreamed of exploring them. For millennia, it was only a dream. And when humanity began inventing the tools to study them, they ran into the ultimate speed limit, the speed of light itself. Einstein's famous theory stated nothing could travel faster, which meant that even if a way could be found to travel that quickly, it would still take years to reach even the nearest of Earth's neighbors. The stars seemed so close, and yet they would be forever out of man's reach. Funny thing about people, you tell them no, and they'll try that much harder. You tell them it's impossible, and they will spit in your eye and prove you wrong. Enter hyperspace, the ultimate shortcut. Magellan couldn't travel any faster in that strange dimension, but the journey was so much shorter. What would have taken generations in normal space was now the journey of mere weeks, and the sky truly was the limit. But even a journey of weeks could wear on people's nerves when they were packed in a cramped space with only each other for company. Kurt, Sujun, and Khadija had a project to keep them busy. Will and Nakisa had their shipboard duties. Graham was more than happy to pore over his biology texts, and Eli was utterly unflappable by nature, which left Therese bored out of her mind, despite the training regimen Will kept her on, and surrounded by a crew she was unable to escape. In every system under pressure, something has to give. Khadija wanted to scream in utter frustration as she glared at the alien device. It had so far stubbornly refused to give up its secrets no matter what she tried. She had determined fairly quickly where its data connections were located, and Kurt had whipped up a handy interface that allowed her to plug in her personal computer. Only what little data she'd been able to coax out of it thus far had been complete gibberish. She'd hoped that it used a binary system, which would have simplified things immensely, but instead she discovered to her dismay it was in fact a quantum system, and that threw all her calculations right out the window. She was familiar with quantum computers, of course. They were incredible devices, and she could play one like a Stradivarius, but walking into one cold and knowing nothing about how it operated, the language it used, or the internal logic that programmed it, was like a blind man trying to navigate the Amazon. In other words, damn near impossible. But she'd promised to do her best, so with a heavy sigh tried yet another algorithm, hoping this time she'd strike gold. You're not fooling anyone, you know. Khadija's head snapped up at the sound as she spotted Therese leaning against the bulkhead. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, not liking her tone and already frustrated to begin with. "You heard me," the telepath continued, an unfriendly expression on her face. "Why are you knocking yourself out over this? I mean, it's not like you care or anything." "Go away," the hacker grumbled as she tried to go back to work. "Believe me, I wish I could," Therese told her, "and let's face it, so do you." The Iranian spun around in her seat. "And just what is that supposed to mean?" she snarled. "I thought that was obvious," she said coldly. "We were all there when the director told us your story, remember?" Khadija colored with sudden anger, but Therese pressed on. "You spent your whole life hacking other nations, crippling their systems, stealing their information. Maybe you thought you were some sort of patriot. But I guess that wasn't enough for you, was it? I guess you just figured, hey, why not make a little money while I'm at it?" She took a step closer. "You knew what would happen when you tried to sell those codes. Whoever bought them would have launched the missiles, and once they did, it was all over." "Boom!" she hissed, pantomiming an explosion with her hands. "Millions dead, all because of you." Khadija leapt out of her seat, pointing her finger at the telepath's chest. "Don't you dare judge me!" she snapped back at her. "You don't know me and you have no idea what my life was like." "Oh, don't even," Therese said sarcastically. "You want to play the who had a more fucked up childhood game? Because I'll win, hands down, every time. She folded her arms across her chest. I bet you had a tropical island all picked out, some quiet little corner where you could sit on the beach and sip daiquiris, while the world blew itself to hell. Bitch! Khadijah screamed, her hands coming up like claws as she leapt for her, only to be yanked off her feet to dangle at the last second. She flailed helplessly as Eli held up both her and Therese without strain, shaking his head. Ladies, 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 this is most unseemly, he told them as they squirmed in his grasp. Let me go! Therese shrieked. Don't touch me! What's the meaning of this? Will demanded as he raced over to the commotion. The ladies were having a slight disagreement, Eli told him, as the rest of the crew came from wherever they'd been lurking to stare at the tableau. The two women struggled frantically to break free, but the Israeli's grip was like iron. Will shook his head in resignation. Put them down, he sighed. Eli did as he was asked, setting them both back on the deck and releasing them. Therese shrank back against the bulkhead, her eyes wild with panic, while Khadijah's whole body trembled in barely contained fury. Neutral corners. Now! Will growled, tapping both Eli and Nikesa on the shoulder and pointing them at the two women. They herded the would-be combatants away from one another, showing them their seats, while the captain had a quick private word with Graham, who quickly scurried off. I'm not going to ask who started it or what it was about, Will said quietly, as they both glared at him. But I'm telling you, it ends now. I will not have this on my ship. We have a job to do, and we will damn well do it, no matter what, because the people back on Earth are counting on us. Graham reappeared with 2 mugs of cocoa, smiling as he pressed one into each of their hands. Here, drink this, he told them. Trust me, it'll make you feel better. They both looked at him warily, but as Will stared at them both like misbehaving schoolchildren, they shrank back into their seats and began dutifully sipping the steaming cups of hot chocolate. Now, here's what's going to happen, the captain told them. You will finish your cocoa, and then you will both be escorted back to your quarters. You will remain there until 0700 hours, at which time you will have breakfast. And then we will discuss this. Is that understood? The two women managed curt nods of acknowledgement. Good. Now finish your drinks, and get out of my sight. Will turned his back on them both as they downed the last of their chocolate, as his 2 bouncers walked them back to their rooms. How much did you dose them with? Will asked softly, once they were out of earshot. 20 milligrams of diazepam each, Graham replied. It should kick in pretty quickly. Good, he replied as Sujin shook her head. You realize that is only a temporary fix, she told him. What happens tomorrow? I don't know, he sighed. Deal with it. Easier said than done, Kurt said carefully. At least Eli seems pretty even-tempered, Sujin pointed out. By nature and design, Eli said with a smile, returning to the group with Nikesa in tow. They both settled in? Will asked his navigator. They're mad as elephants during must, she said darkly. But yeah, they're quieting down. To be honest, I'm surprised this hasn't happened sooner, Eli informed them. Considering their backgrounds, this was inevitable. I know the space program uses psychological profiles to vet the astronaut corps, and quite frankly, neither of them would pass muster. If it wasn't for their skills, you'd be right, Will agreed. But that's the thing, we need them. And it's not like I can just drop them off at the nearest planet. I say you let them fight it out, Nikesa told him. Let them get it out of their system. Believe me, I wish I could, he replied. But if we let those 2 go at it, it'll end with one of them dead. You know what the problem is, don't you? Graham piped up. They're too much alike. Ja, this is so, Kurt concurred. They would disagree, of course. The problem is that they are not part of the crew, Sujin said pointedly. Not really, not in their eyes. Perhaps not in ours either, she admitted reluctantly. Then that's where we need to start, Will said firmly. Kurt, you and Khadijah have been working together for a while now. Start trying to draw her out, establish a rapport. Maybe we can show them they are part of this crew. We do that and we're halfway home. I will try, the engineer said with a nod. And Therese? Will sighed. It looks like she's my problem. It wasn't long before Magellan arrived at the outer reaches of the target system. Things were still tense aboard the ship, but thankfully there had been no repeats of the battle royale they'd witnessed earlier. The situation, however, was far from resolved. They were strapped into their couches as they passed the comet shell surrounding the system. "Are we ready for translation?" Will asked Nikisa. "Ready," she replied. "Target beacon is locked in. I'll have no trouble locating the planet it's orbiting." "Good to hear," he told her. "I'm almost tempted to go straight to the beacon in hyperspace and then translate, but if that planet is inhabited, that might come across as an unfriendly act. Last thing we need to do is start a war." He looked back over his shoulder. "Eli, you have your helmet on?" "I do," he said with a chuckle. "I feel like an escapee from a B-movie." A chuckle broke out amongst the crew, lightening the tension. "Graham, keep close eye on his biometrics in case he dies on us again," he said with a smile. "Already on it," the astrobiologist confirmed. "Excellent," Will nodded. "Ready, sensor watch. Kurt, you have the ball." "Copy, I have the ball," he confirmed. "Preparing to translate in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Translate." The strange feeling of dislocation hit them all once again as they returned to normal space and then disappeared just as quickly. "Translation complete," Nikesa verified. "Sensors online." "Start with the EM band," the captain told the scientists. "Let's see if we can pick up any comm traffic. Might give us an idea what we're heading into." "Roger," Sujin told him as she began a frequency sweep. "Got you!" Nikesa exclaimed. Second planet in the system, right in the middle of the Goldilocks zone. She turned and grinned at Will. "That's our target." "Set your course," he said with smile as she plugged it into the navigation system. "Kurt, bring the fusion drive online." "Fusion reactor is at 90%, he informed him. "Ready for your command." "I'm picking up something," Sujin said suddenly. "Seems to be at about 0.10 megahertz. She ran the signal through her headset, listening carefully before frowning. "I'm not sure if it's anything. Almost sounds like random noise." "Keep on it," Will told her before nodding at Kurt. "Bring up the engines. 10% power to start." "Copy, fusion drive is online at 10% power," he replied, as the hull began to thrum softly. "What the?" Graham said in confusion as he fiddled with his instruments. "You have something?" Will asked him. "I'm not sure. Nikisa, can you alter course by, 0.12 degrees negative y-axis, 5 degrees positive z-axis?" She glanced over at Will, who gave her a nod. "Do it," he told her. "Copy, 0.12 degrees negative y-axis, 5 degrees positive z-axis," she repeated as she made the course adjustment. "I caught a blip of something transversing one of the ice bodies," Graham told them. "I almost didn't see it." He worked the controls carefully, trying to capture what had caught his attention, and then stared in shock. "You are not going to believe this," the astrobiologist told them. "I'm throwing it onto the display." The image appeared on each of their consoles, and one by one their expressions matched Graham's. "Is that a—" Sujin whispered. "Can't be," Nikesa said, shaking her head. "Then you tell me what it is," Graham demanded. "Excuse me," Eli said, removing his helmet. "I'm no scientist, but to me that looks a great deal like—" "A tree," Therese said in amazement.